Muchachos y muchachas. So years ago when 𝐤𝐤𝐿 was hiding out, and I know it seems like it was so long ago, but it really wasn't, many were speculating where she could be hiding out at. And then there was one theory that surfaced that she could be hiding out in a submarine, and then we learned that it was because she was a licensed submersible vehicle pilot, meaning that she was licensed to drive submarines. Of course, within given context of this certain island associated with a certain guy, Jeffrey, we'll just call it LSJ. So one could understand that within coincidental timing, when we found out that Biden's, as in Joe Biden, the resident in chief, and his close relatives owning a small plot of land in the nearby vicinity of LSJ, theories ran rampant. The island being called Water Island.
To the islands.
So theories were being spread that because Water Island was near a nearby submarine base that was used in World War II, and because 𝐤𝐿 was able to operate submarines, that there was some sort of operation that could have been going on between the pond waters, if you catch what I'm talking about. But here is some actual history on Water Island and its relationship with the Bidens. Hold on to your butts, secure your wigs, stay right there. We're going to go through it. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, My Patriot Supply. It's clear, the unthinkable is here. Our most trusted institutions now deceive us boldly every day. Something is clearly wrong and time is short to become more self-reliant and secure the future of your family. Act today with My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply, the country's largest preparedness company, is more than equipped to stock your shelves. Their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit provides delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that last up to 25 years in storage. And right now you can get it for $200 off. You guys can get this by going to preparewithnatalie.com. That's preparewithnatalie.com. Based upon war planning, the Caribbean operations faced the Atlantic and anticipated a war in which Germany and Italy would be the major opponents, and the Caribbean would be relatively immune to attack. As of 17th of June 1944, the Water Island Battery had the bomb-proof underground fort and pillbox completed. 19th of June, 1944, the U.S. Department of Defense acquired Water Island from the East Asiatic Company, West Indian Company, in other words, through condemnation proceedings, eminent domain, for $10,000 for the explicit purpose of establishing a coastal defense installation on the island. The military facility on the Water Island was named Fort Segarra in honor of Lieutenant Colonel Rafael Angel Segarra from Puerto Rico, a highly decorated World War I veteran. With your mini history lesson, with that being said, this is Water Island and Fort Segarra. Fort Segarra is not far away from a plot of land that the Bidens were to purchase, right over here. So as it goes, in 2005, James and Sarah Biden, Joe's brother, purchased a plot of land on Water Island in the middle of the island for $150,000. They split that plot of land into three and sold the northernmost part of that plot to Scott Green and his wife, selling it for $150,000, essentially breaking the Bidens even on their purchase price. Some interesting dealings came out of this trio, and not necessarily as an inner working, but nonetheless still very interesting. Let's start with Scott Green, an interesting individual. Scott Green was not only a high-profile lobbyist for Joe Biden with projects of special interest, but he's also currently listed as the executive director for the NFL Referees Association. Okay, so I just want to clarify some information, some updated information since I made this video back in 2020. Now, Scott Green actually is no longer, I believe, the director of the NFL refs. He's actually part-time now, and he works as a Washington, D.C. contractor for public safety and criminal justice agencies, part of his firm, the Lafayette Group. And of course, one could speculate why, he's back in D.C. Of course, one of his, what seems to be besties, Joe Biden, is the resident in chief. And so one can just speculate why he has all these governmental contracts all of a sudden again. And from the industry of lobbying, Scott Green found himself pivoting towards more of a private sector of consulting. So he thus founded the consulting firm, the Lafayette Group. According to Politico, records show that this consulting firm, the Lafayette Group, received 2 awards from the Federal Emergency Management Agency worth a total of $5.8 million to Scott Green, his personal prior lobbyist and friend. And the service that they contracted the Lafayette Group to do was to develop communication strategies for interoperable communications. So get this. They get awarded that $5.8 million, the Lafayette Group, who is owned by Scott Green. 3 days later after that, Scott Green and his wife, they gave James and Sarah Biden, who is Joe Biden's brother once again, they gave him a $133,000 mortgage for the plot of land on Water Island. 3 years go by, and then Scott Green and his wife release the mortgage and basically wipe their hands clean and say, hey, James and Sarah Biden, they paid everything in full. We're good. Another project awarded to Scott Green and his consulting firm was DARE, a 90s program that we remember being pushed in school. The Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program. DARE was basically a drug prevention program in which would encourage police officers to go to schools and to warn against crime and drug use.
The granddaddy of them all.
People will tell you that drugs are cool and that everybody's doing them. But you know what? You're wrong.
DARE.
From 1999 to 2010, Scott Green made about $40,000 a year enrolling this program with his consulting firm. Biden ensured that DARE would be part of the 1994 crime bill, in which would make a big stamp of approval for harsher, tough on crime policies. As a 90s kid myself, I remember the DARE program even within my school, and it was actually a pop culture reference. So it was a popular program in law enforcement and in schools. However, lots of research continuously proved that this program was not effective at all. According to Politico, the 1995 Reason article cited an estimate from the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy that the program was taking in about $40 million in federal funding annually, despite research showing it was ineffective. $40 million. So research after research after study kept publishing and kept disproving this program and further proving that it was ineffective. Yet, the crime bill, mind you, was still passed. Therefore, there were still harsh punishments and policies being propelled within our society back then. And so, Biden continuously secured funding for an ineffective program in his final years in the Senate. Let me actually define what pork is. A lot of people actually don't know. So pork barrel is a metaphor for the appropriation of government spending for localized projects secured solely or primarily to bring money to a representative's district. The usage originated in American English. Scholars use it as a technical term regarding legislative control of local appropriations. So Harper's Magazine actually wrote a really interesting article on Biden and his pork procuring escapades, basically closely emphasizing that many studies, professionals, organizations, you name it, were stressing how ineffective the DARE program was, and not only ineffective, but also potentially harmful therapy. Despite all this, get this part of the article. Here's the juicy part. Why would Biden saddle up with Stevens and Grassley to support DARE, a failed program? As mentioned by Glenn Greenwald, Biden has long been the leading advocate of the hardest and most aggressive drug criminalization laws and general anti-crime measures. And there's this. DARE's longtime lobbyist Scott Green once worked under Biden on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Green also donated $2,300 to Biden last year. Harper's contacted Green about the DARE and earmark requests, and I'm just going to assume that they never heard back because this article stayed the same since 2008. Now, sidelining to Joe's brother, James. It's your turn. Although Joe Biden denied by stating in 2019, quote, "I never talked with my son or my brother or anyone else, even distant family, about their business interests, period. There are receipts out there that suggest otherwise." I found this very interesting because it paralleled a lot with Joe Biden's friend Scott Green and his contractual awardings for governmental contracts and that stuff. So this is from the New York Post, and it states, besides this claim, Kevin Justice, a longtime friend of the Bidens and the president to a huge construction company, Hillstone, frequented the White House many times within Joe Biden's vice presidency. One time in November 4th of 2010, he made a visit. 3 weeks later, James Biden, Joe's brother, was announced by Hillstone, this big construction company, as the executive VP. And by the way, James Biden never had any sort of working history or resume in regards to construction or housing construction. Here's the interesting part. James Biden was joining Hillstone just as the firm was starting negotiations to win a massive contract in the war-torn Iraq. 6 months later, the firm announced a contract to build 100,000 homes. It was part of a $35 billion 500,000 unit project deal won by the TRAC Development, a South Korean company. 𝐬𝐤stone, this construction company, received a $22 million U.S. federal government contract to manage a construction project for the State Department. David Richer, son of the parent company founder, was not shy in explaining 𝐬𝐤stone's success in securing government contracts. He told investors in a private meeting, "It really helps to have the brother of the vice president as a partner," according to someone who was there. James Biden remained with 𝐬𝐤stone International, which accumulated contracts from the federal government for dozens of projects onward, including projects in the United States, Puerto Rico, and Mozambique. So back to Water Island. Although his brother James bought the plot of land, divvied it up with Scott Green, this plot of land was never developed. Weird, right? However, the Bidens, plural, interest in the island is intriguing. Now we're jumping back to Politico for this quote. It says that one Water Island landowner who asked not to be named discussing a sensitive subject said the Bidens learned about the forgotten little island through family friends from Baltimore, but that those friends were not among the island's 100-odd residents. The landowner said that the Bidens rented a house when visiting the island. She said, "I was amazed that the Bidens ever wanted to come down here," citing the logistical challenges of traveling to the remote island, which normally requires taking a boat from nearby St. Thomas. She continued, "I guess it's where you want to go when you want to get away from the rat race of DC and the supervision and observation." And with that direct quote from the landowner, that does seem a bit suspicious, yeah? Back in 2009, E! News actually published an article which covered a Biden relative calling neighbors on the island trying to get him a place to stay. It reads, "Joe Biden's brother Frank owned land on Water Island, a residential paradise." By the way, this article was written back in 2009, and they purchased that land in 2005. So, Frank owns land on Water Island, a residential paradise, short ferry ride away from St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, but he hasn't built a house on it yet. Joe came down and of course needed some space to stay, so Frankie B asked his neighbors if they wouldn't mind if his brother stayed in their newly built vacation home so he could get some peace and quiet for the holidays before he takes office in a couple weeks. Naturally, the good Americans they are, they delayed their own vacations to accommodate the future VP. Kicking people out of their houses, thought it was the economy's job, Joe. And it seems after E! News released that article that Joe Biden's office became enraged and came at E! News for publishing that article. It reads, "Biden's press secretary calls and emails. The rental was arranged by a realtor who contacted the owners to see if they wanted to rent the house," said Elizabeth Alexander, spokeswoman for the Delaware senator. "The owners expressed an interest in renting the house and were paid in full market rates for the rental." And then the E! article continues, "Meanwhile, our original source swears that it was Biden's brother, a neighbor to the Water Island property, who asked the owners if Joe and his family could have the place over the holidays, which the owners agreed to, thereby canceling their own vacation, not a realtor. In other words, the whole thing was pulled off as a neighborly favor, not strictly biz arrangement, but no big deal, right? Yes and no. This is the future vice president of the United States we're talking about." So then the E! News author of this article asked the press secretary, Miss Alexander, was she sure her details were correct, as that's not what the author was told, and Biden's press secretary never responded. Interestingly, there is an Airbnb listing that states that this house hosted famous guests who value the privacy, like Brad Pitt, Kate Blanchett, and Vice President Joe Biden with his family and entourage. Stump. And that they spent a Christmas week with them, as did another U.S. senator, governor, and the head of a labor union. Now, later on, the Obama administration actually vacationed in St. Croix, still within the U.S. Virgin Islands, due to more readily available infrastructure and for better travel accommodations with the Secret Service. Now, I know what everybody is thinking, and I know that I haven't mentioned it only because I want to be as factual as possible, right? So I can present things that are concrete, and we can connect the dots if it corroborates. So I will leave this up to your own assessment, and that's why I'm leaving this towards the end. For perspective, here is Water Island, St. Croix, and St. James. And I'm just peppering in St. James just for and giggles. Also, to the earlier mention, because Water Island was bought as a protective base of another base that housed submarines, a lot of people are making some sort of inferences between the abilities of Glenn and her submarine piloting skills. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole simply because that's all I can present, okay? But you guys can make your own assessments. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this info dump of Water Island, the whole triangulated relationship between Joe Biden and Scott Green, and of course his brother, James Biden, and their kiting of this plot of lands. I don't know if they currently own this plot of land or if they are developing, but nonetheless, this information is pretty interesting if you would agree. Now, if there's any updated information that I should know about Water Island, please comment it in the comments below, and maybe I'll make a part 2 to this. But until then, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.